a werewolf shifter romance written by Catherine Stewart. Prologue. The scene opens on a moon-drenched ancient glade, centuries before our main story. Ethereal silver-gold light pulses softly from the hands of several figures, spirit weavers, as they gently coax vibrant, oversized moonflowers to bloom, their collective hum a song of life and spiritual harmony that resonates with the forest itself. One younger weaver, Lyra, Rinna's ancestor, smiles. Her eyes reflect the gentle light, a sense of profound peace on her face. The harmonious hum shattered, a harsh guttural war cry from the edge of the glade. Dark figures, clad in stark, unadorned leather, bearing crude iron weapons that deaden the moonlight, they storm into the clearing, the Purifiers. Their leader, a formidable Lycan, eyes burning with cold fire. Malakor, Vorlag's ancestor, he roars. Abominations, your twisted magic defiles the true spirit of the wolf. Tonight, no, we cleanse this land. The weavers, startled, but resolute. They cease their ritual. The moonflowers instantly dim. Lyra feels a cold dread clamp around her heart. Peace, gone. Adrenaline, fear for her elders. The weavers raise their hands, not in aggression, no, to weave protective shields of shimmering spiritual energy. The air crackles, opposing forces, life-affirming light against suppressive, deadening darkness. Malakor sneers. Your wisps and whispers will not save you, not from true strength. He brandishes a dark, obsidian-laced chain, an early form of the weaver's bane. Its mere presence. A spiritual nausea through Lyra. The elder weaver cries out, Malakor! Why do you bring this hatred to a place of peace? Our ways nurture life. They do not threaten. Malakor's laugh is a harsh bark. Life that does not spring from fang and claw is a lie. Your spirit, a canker, and we are the cure. Terror, a fierce protective surge for her people. Lyra watches Malakor, his eyes, unshakable hatred. He doesn't just disagree. Her breath catches. He loathes what we are. He wants us gone. The battle is joined. Spiritual light against crushing, fanatical darkness. Purifiers charge. Iron weapons clash, crack, against weaver shields. Shields ripple, crack. Weavers cry out, pain, iron, or perhaps the Purifiers themselves, disrupting their power. Malakor targets the eldest weaver. He swings the chain. It whistles. Thud. Around the elder's arm. The elder screams, a sound of pure spiritual agony. His light flickers violently, then extinguishes. Slumped, the weaver's bane. It doesn't just bind, it strangles the spirit. Lyra watches. Horror, it drains them. It silences their soul. Despair threatens. But then, another Purifier lurches. For a younger weaver, Lyra acts, fear, grief, desperate will, all poured into a focused point of light, a lash of pure spirit, raw, defensive. It strikes, the attacker, reeling back, a yelp, shock, spiritual burn, but it's not enough. No. Too many. Their fervor, absolute. One by one, the weavers fall, captured, their light, smothered. Malakor stands over the fallen elder, grim satisfaction etched on his face. Lyra, wounded, her spirit battered, dragged away with the few survivors. The glade, devastation, moonflowers trampled, air thick, iron, blood, extinguished hope. Malakor raises his weapon. His voice echoes in the sudden stark silence. Let this be a lesson. The age of the false spirits is over. Only the true wolf will reign. As Lyra is forced from the glade, her heart breaking, she looks back. The desecrated sanctuary, a tiny, uncrushed moonflower bud, barely visible in the shadows. A desperate, almost mad thought sparks within her. They can cut the blooms, but the roots run deep. The spirit remembers, a fragile ember of defiance in overwhelming darkness. The scene fades. On that tiny, resilient bud, and the chilling certainty of Malakor's victory. The air grows cold. The my crown, it felt heavy today, heavier than usual. Pressing down, a constant reminder. Duty. The Nightclaw Dominion looking to me, their alpha king. And then, there was Fang, my wolf. He paced inside me, a relentless, agitated energy gnawing at my bones for moons now. What did he want? He never just wanted. He knew things, felt things I sometimes didn't, or maybe wouldn't, let myself see. This throne room, all stone and echoes in the scent of old power. It felt more like a cage these days. My chamber, high in the mountain stronghold, usually offered a view that calmed most storms within. Yet today, even the endless vista of jagged peaks and shadowed valleys couldn't soothe Fang. He howled a silent, desperate thing deep inside my chest. What is it you sense, old friend? A void? A threat? Or just the wild? Calling to a king too long bound by court and council? The Elder Council, bless their ancient hides, didn't help, always whispering, about heirs, about perceived weaknesses, about the growing shadow of rivals like that snake, Vorlag, and his Ironfang coalition. More importantly, they didn't understand Fang. They didn't understand this hollowness, this emptiness carved into me. Because of that, their council often felt like stones piled on an already breaking back. Maybe it was fate I felt this way. This deep unease that had nothing to do with politics or war. In fact, it felt older, deeper, primal. Fang let out another frustrated rumble, a vibration only I could truly feel. Patience, I told him, though my own was wearing thin as old leather. I stood, the furs of my throne rustling. The great hall, empty, save for the crackling hearth and the ever-watchful guards at the far doors. Still, I felt 1,000 eyes on me. The weight of expectation, the burden of being alpha. Moments later, I decided, this restlessness, this gnawing, it had to be met head-on. A cage wouldn't do. Not for me, not for Fang. What does a king do when his own spirit howls for something unseen, something unknown? Do you think he just ignores it? This kingdom was mine to protect, sure, but my sanity, that was mine to salvage. Because without it, what good was I to anyone? The silence in the grand hall seemed to stretch, each tick of some unseen clock a beat against my fraying nerves. And just like that, a decision began to form. A dangerous, perhaps reckless, seed taking root. What could possibly go wrong? By stretching my legs a bit, right? This unease, it was a sickness, and I was desperate for the cure, whatever it might be. A sharp rap on the massive oak doors. It shattered the heavy silence. A messenger with news that would only fuel the fire already burning in my gut. Scene 1.2. Whispers of war, a king's resolve. Mood, tense, decisive, foreboding, trope, duty overall, the alpha's burden. Following that sharp rap, the messenger entered, bowing low, his scent tinged with the nervous sweat of bad news. He spoke of border skirmishes, Ironfang wolves testing our defenses near the Whispering Pass. Vorlag. Again, that name, a venomous hiss in the air, and then, Fang surged within me. Not with agitation this time, but with a focused, predatory intent. An enemy we can see. He seemed to project, a grim satisfaction in his ethereal rumble. Something to sink our teeth into. The Elder Council would advise caution, deliberation, endless meetings. But then, what did they know of the fire in an alpha's blood? The instinct to meet a threat head-on? They saw politics. I saw a challenge to my dominion, an insult to the Nightclaw. Prepare my guard, I commanded, my voice harder than I intended. A growl, an alpha's growl, because leniency is a luxury kings can't afford. We ride at once. Liam, my beta, ever loyal, ever pragmatic, stepped from the shadows near the hearth. He'd been listening, of course. He always was. His scent was calm, a steadying presence. But his eyes held a question. To make things worse, he knew my moods. Knew this wasn't just about a border skirmish. "Kaelin," he began, that familiar tone he only used when we were nearly alone. "Is this wise? So soon after the last reports of unsettling magic in those foothills?" Unsettling magic. What's worse, that was another open loop, another thread of disquiet that had been plaguing our scouts. Strange storms, whispers of unnatural occurrences, purifier tactics? Perhaps. Deep down I knew the truth. Or part of it anyway. This ride wasn't just about Vorlag. It was about Fang. It was about me. It was about this damn void. Wisdom, Liam? I gave a harsh laugh. Wisdom has kept me chained to this throne while my spirit rots. Fang needs to run. I need to remind Vorlag whose lands these are. I needed to feel the wind, the hunt, the raw power that was my birthright. Not only that, but maybe, just maybe, out there in the wild under the open sky, Fang would quiet his endless searching. Because perhaps the answer lay in action, not in brooding. As a result, my decision was made. Liam, ever the dutiful beta, simply nodded, his concern a silent weight between us. "As you command, Alpha." His voice was low, a rumble of fealty. He knew better than to argue when the King's and Fang's will was set. The air in the chamber crackled with a new kind of tension now, the promise of impending conflict. What followed was a flurry of activity, armor clanging, orders being barked. Before he could move to carry out my orders, I added, "And Liam, be ready. For anything. My gut tells me this is more than it seems." Could a king ever just have a simple ride? I wondered. The scent of oiled leather, sharp steel, and the eager anticipation of the hunt filled the air as we prepared to descend from the mountain stronghold. But a colder, more ancient scent. It seemed to cling to the wind. A premonition I couldn't quite shake. Soon after leaving the stronghold, the sky. It turned a bruised, sickly purple. The wind, moments before a playful mountain breeze, whipped into a furious snarl, carrying the scent of ozone, and something else. Something old, rotten, like disturbed earth from a cursed grave. This wasn't natural, as if summoned by some dark will. Rain began to lash down, cold as death, blurring the treacherous mountain pass into a slick nightmare. Fang was a raging inferno inside me now, no longer restless with an unknown yearning, but a focused, defensive fury. "Trap," he roared in my mind. "Purifiers." The word itself, a shard of ice in my gut. How could they have known our route? Unless, the thought of a traitor, a spy, somewhere deep, a fresh twist of the knife. Because of that realization, my senses went on high alert. "Iron Fang, ambush!" One of my guards screamed, his voice swallowed by the wind. And then, they were on us. Dark shapes, moving with unnatural speed through the maelstrom. Their eyes burning with that same cold, fanatical light I'd only heard of in the darkest legends of the Purifier Creed. They reeked of wet fur, bloodlust, and that same cursed, deadening aura I'd scented on the wind. With every heartbeat, the battle was joined, a desperate, swirling chaos of tooth and claw, of nightclaw steel against purifier iron, a metal that seemed to drink the strength from a Lycan. My men fought like the devils they were, their howls of defiance swallowed by the storm. Without warning, a massive Iron Fang brute, reeking of Vorlag's personal scent, lunged for me. I met him head-on, shifting mid-stride, the agony and ecstasy of the transformation, a familiar fire. Bones snapped, reformed, fur sprouted, black as a starless night. Fang was unleashed, a torrent of claws and teeth. We tore into them, a whirlwind of primal rage, the fight, brutal, visceral. The taste of blood, both ours and theirs, filled my mouth, The clang of steel, the wet rip of flesh, the howls of pain and fury. It was a symphony of slaughter. But then, there were too many. And their magic, it was subtle. A creeping cold that sought to deaden our wolves, to extinguish our inner fire. A silver-laced arrow, reeking of wolfsbane and something darker, something that felt like spiritual poison, found my flank. Agony. Exploded through me, hot, searing. A fire that even Fang couldn't immediately quench. In that moment, my world tilted. I stumbled, a roar of pain ripping from my throat. Another arrow followed, and then a brutal blow from a dark iron mace, and the world began to fracture. My strength, it was draining, like water through cupped hands. "No!" Fang howled, a desperate, fading echo. Not like this. Was this how the Alpha King of the Nightclaw met his end? Betrayed? Ambushed by zealots in a cursed storm? The irony. It wasn't lost on me. Even as darkness, cold and absolute, began to claim the edges of my vision. With a final defiant snarl that was more Fang than me, I collapsed, the scent of wet earth, my own blood, and the encroaching shadows. The last things I knew. The raging storm was the only sound, a merciless howling dirge over what felt like the end of everything, as the last vestiges of my consciousness slipped away into an abyss of pain and silence. Darkness. And then, not quite darkness. More like gray. A throbbing, relentless gray, pulsing behind my eyelids. My body. A sack of shattered stones, each one grinding against the next. Truth be told, I didn't even know if I was a body for a moment there. Just pain. A vast, empty ocean of it. But then, a scent. Foreign. Not pack. Not Nightclaw mountain air. Not even the metallic tang of blood and battle I remembered. No, this was different. Earthy, yes, like crushed herbs and damp soil. And then, something else beneath it. Faint. Elusive. Like starlight? Was I dead? Had Vorlag's Purifiers sent me to some strange afterlife scented with wildflowers and impossible things? Maybe it was fate I'd ended up wherever here was. Despite that initial confusion, I tried to move. Bad idea. A groan tore from my throat, raw and weak, pathetic. Not the sound of an Alpha King. Fang, my wolf, was a faint whimper deep inside. A wounded echo where a roaring inferno should have been. He was hurt, badly, which meant I was too. Moments later, my eyelids fluttered open. The light, dim, filtered through what looked like a crude hut wall made of woven branches and dried mud. A small fire crackled nearby, its warmth a feeble defense against the chill sunk deep into my bones. I was lying on a pallet of furs, not mine, softer, and that scent again, stronger now. Herbs, and that strange, almost luminous undertone. Deep down, I knew the truth, or a sliver of it. Someone had found me. Someone had helped. Before I could process more, a shadow fell over me. My instincts, battered as they were, screamed. Without thinking, I tried to snarl, to rise. But a wave of agony slammed me back down, a choked gasp escaping instead. The shadow resolved into a woman, small, too small to be Lycan. Her scent, now overwhelming, confirmed it. No wolf. Wolfless. The term, a sneer in my mind, a mark of scorn, of the lowest omega or an outcast. And then, I saw her eyes, wide, wary, like a startled deer, her hands stained with dirt and what looked like my blood, clutched a wooden bowl. She was young, frightened, and utterly, impossibly, wolfless. Why would a wolfless nobody save an Alpha King, especially one who likely reeked of the very wolves who might hunt her kind for sport? This made no sense. Still, here I was, alive, just because of her. The thought, a bitter pill. The silence stretched between us, thick with my pain and her fear. Her gaze was a question, and mine, I'm sure, was a demand she couldn't possibly answer. She finally spoke, her voice soft, hesitant, a mere whisper that somehow cut through the fog in my head. You should not move. Alpha. And just like that, the impossible became my new, infuriating reality. Following her whispered warning, I tried to sit up anyway. Pride, even battered and broken, dies hard in an alpha. But then, the world swam, a nauseating vortex of pain. I fell back with a curse that was more air than sound. Alpha? She repeated, her voice trembling just a bit. She took a tentative step closer, holding out the bowl. The steam rising from it carried a pungent, earthy aroma. Broth. It will help. Help? I was the Alpha King of the Nightclaw. I didn't need help from a nobody, a wolfless stray. Yet, the undeniable truth was, I was weak. Weak as a newborn kit. Fang was a dull ache, his usual fierce presence a mere flicker. My legendary Lycan healing. It was sluggish, barely there. As if that cursed purifier poison still clung to my spirit. Had this wolfless creature truly kept death at bay? How? Despite that gnawing question. I glared at her. Who are you? My voice. A rasp. A shadow of its usual command. Where are my guard? What happened? So many questions, and my head felt like it was splitting. She flinched, but held her ground. I am Rinna. I found you after the storm, alone. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. In fact, she seemed to study the dirt floor more than my face. Alone. The word, a hammer blow. My guard, Vorlag, the ambush. It all came rushing back, a tide of fury and grief. Because of that, a snarl finally rumbled in my chest. Weak. But there. Vorlag. The men who attacked you. They were long gone, Rinna said softly. The storm was terrible. She offered the bowl again. Please, you need strength. Truth be told, every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to assert dominance even in this pathetic state. On the other hand, Fang, that traitorous part of my soul, he let out a soft, almost contented sigh at her proximity, at her scent. It was maddening. He, the embodiment of my alpha power, was drawn to this. This nothing. This wolfless girl. Mate. He'd whispered in the dregs of my consciousness when she'd first touched me. A delirious, impossible thought. Now even weakened, the notion pulsed from him. Faint but insistent. No, I snarled back in my mind. She is wolfless, an outcast, not mate. What happens when your own wolf, your very essence, betrays everything you know, everything you are? Do you just roll over? More importantly, what did she want? Shelter? Protection? Was this some elaborate trap? Paranoia. A bitter taste. I had to get out of here. Had to get back to my pack. This dependency, this weakness, it was a chain. And she, unknowingly or not, held one end. I need to leave, I stated, trying to infuse my voice with authority it didn't possess. Now. My body, however, had other ideas. Rinna just looked at me with those wide, unreadable eyes, a flicker of something, pity, resolve, in their depths, before she simply said, "You are in no state to go anywhere, Alpha. Not yet." And the infuriating thing was, Fang silently agreed with her. Scene 2.3. The bitter draft, the unspoken truce. Mood, resigned, temporarily. Wary, calculating. Trope, point of no return for this stage. Reluctant acceptance of aid. Following her quiet, firm statement, a fresh wave of impotent rage washed over me. No state to go anywhere? I was Kalen Volkov. I commanded legions. I didn't take orders from her. But then, another searing throb from my wounds, a dizzying spell that made the crude hut spin, a brutal reminder of my current pathetic reality. Truth be told, she was right. As much as it galled me, as much as Fang's quiet approval of her presence infuriated my human pride, I was trapped by my injuries, trapped by this wolfless girl's unexpected, unwelcome charity. Was this what it felt like to be truly powerless? The thought, a cold stone in my gut. Despite that internal battle, I finally grudgingly gave a curt nod towards the bowl she still held. My pride could only take so much abuse before survival instinct, however battered, kicked in. Because of that, I had to concede, if only for now. She approached cautiously, as one might approach a wounded, unpredictable wolf, which I supposed was exactly what I was. Her movements, hesitant, yet there was an odd sort of grace to them, a quiet competence as she helped me sit up just enough to drink. The broth was surprisingly good, warm, revitalizing. It wasn't the rich, blood-heavy stews of my stronghold, but it soothed something deep inside, something beyond just physical hunger. Maybe it was fate, that she knew what I needed even when I didn't want to admit it. In fact, as I drank, I watched her, really watched her. Her scent, that strange mix of earth and starlight, was less jarring now, almost calming to the frayed edges of my spirit. Fang was practically purring, the traitor. Who is she? I wondered again. An outcast, clearly, but why risk helping me? Why hadn't she just left me to die, or worse, alerted Vorlag? What followed was a tense silence as I finished, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the distant sigh of the wind through the trees. She didn't know what scared her more. Perhaps my presence, or my potential demise. Deep down, her actions spoke of something other than malice. When I am stronger, I said, my voice still rough, but a fraction more steady, I will repay you for this, then I will leave. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of intent. As a result, I was making it clear. This was temporary, a transaction, nothing more. Her eyes, when they met mine, held a flicker of something I couldn't name. Sadness? Understanding? Or just the resignation of someone used to being dismissed? What kind of life had this wolfless woman lived, to look at an alpha king with such quiet sorrow? Without another word, she simply nodded and took the empty bowl. This fragile, unspoken truce, born of my desperation and her inexplicable kindness, felt like walking a knife's edge. The air thickened with unspoken questions, with the weight of my weakness and her secrets. And just like that, everything had changed for me. Chained not by an enemy, but by a wolfless girl in a forgotten hut. Before either of us could speak further, a distant howl, faint, but definitely Lycan. It cut through the forest stillness, making Fang and me both go rigid. Trouble wasn't just coming, it was sniffing at the door. That howl, it wasn't Nightclaw, which meant my presence here, even in this weakened state, had just painted a massive target on this isolated place, and on the wolfless woman who had, for reasons I couldn't fathom, decided to save me. My recovery. It just became a race against time, that howl. Not Nightclaw, which meant trouble. Plain and simple. And I, Kalen Volkov, Alpha King, lying here like a butchered deer, reliant on a wolfless girl. My pride clawed at my throat, raw and bleeding as my wounds. We leave, I rasped, forcing myself to a sitting position, the world spinning like a drunken top. And then Rinna, that was her name, wasn't it? Just looked at me with those wide, too knowing eyes. You can barely stand. Alpha, she said, her voice still soft, but with an edge of something I hadn't heard before. Not defiance, not exactly. More like weary patience, as if she was used to dealing with stubborn, wounded beasts. Truth be told, that's probably exactly what I was in her eyes. Despite that, I pushed myself up, every muscle screaming in protest. Vorlag knows I survived, or his scouts will soon. They'll track me. This hut, It's a death trap for you now, because of me. My own words tasted like ash. To endanger an outcast, someone so clearly outside the pack feuds, it was a stain on my honor, even if she was wolfless. Maybe it was fate that our paths had crossed in this brutal way, dragging her into my cursed conflict. She didn't argue further. Instead, she gathered a small bundle, some dried herbs, a water skin, a knife that looked more like a sharpened twig. The paths I use, they are not for rushing, Alpha, but they are less seen. And so began the most humiliating journey of my life. Leaning on a wolfless girl, every step in agony. Fang, a furious, frustrated girl deep inside me. He hated this weakness. He hated my reliance on her. Yet, even he couldn't deny the way her quiet presence, that strange, almost clean scent of hers, seemed to keep the worst of the spiritual poison from my wounds at bay. How did she do that? Was it just her, or something more? An open loop, that question, hanging in the air between us like the damp mist of the forest. More importantly, she moved through the undergrowth with a silence, a surety, that shamed my own clumsy, pained efforts. She knew the forest, this forgotten edge of the world. In a way, my warriors, for all their tracking skills, never could. What does it say about your kingdom? When the outcasts know its secrets better than the king? She didn't know what scared her more, I suspected, my presence or the thought of being left alone again once I was gone. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig, sent my already frayed nerves screaming. We were exposed, hunted, and my only protection for now was the frail-looking woman whose touch somehow kept the darkness from completely swallowing me. This bitter path, it was a descent into a hell I hadn't known existed. The silence between us stretched, taut and uncomfortable, and as we pressed on, deeper into the woods, further from where I'd fallen, and closer to what? Salvation? Or just a different kind of doom? By the time the first hints of a nightclaw scent marker reached my battered senses, faint, blessedly familiar, but still dangerously far, I was near collapse again, forcing a halt, and the agonizing realization that reaching my own lands would be a trial unlike any I'd faced before. Following that agonizing trek, we finally stumbled upon a Nightclaw border patrol, their shock at seeing me, leaning heavily on a small wolfless woman, my furs torn, my scent thick with blood and weakness. It was a fresh stab to my pride, and then their expression shifted, suspicion, disbelief, and for some, a poorly concealed pity that made fangs snarl in my chest. Was this how my pack saw their alpha king now? Broken, defiled by an outcast's touch? The thought, a venomous serpent coiling in my gut. What followed was a swift, tense journey to the nearest fortified outpost, a grim stone structure clinging to the mountainside. Truth be told, I dreaded it. Facing my warriors in this state, it was a kind of death in itself. Despite that dread, there was no avoiding it. News of my survival, and my companion, would spread like wildfire. The outpost was abuzz with hushed whispers the moment we entered. Eyes followed Rinna like she was a plague carrier. Some warriors, younger ones mostly, just looked confused. But then, the older sentinels, the ones who remembered my father, their gazes, hard, judgmental. Because of that, my own posture straightened, the alpha in me pushing through the pain, through the humiliation. I would not show them how close to breaking I truly was. Liam arrived quickly, his face a mask of relief warring with deep concern. His eyes flickered to Rinna, a question in their depths I wasn't ready to answer. Ilara, our pack's ancient lore keeper, and a woman whose sharp gaze missed nothing, was with him. Her attention, however, seemed almost entirely fixed on Rinna, a strange speculative light in her old eyes. An open loop there for sure. What did she see? Alpha, Liam rumbled, his voice low, for my ears only. Vorlag's attack was coordinated, brutal. We lost good wolves. The grief in his voice, a shared ache. And this woman, she found me, I said, my voice a harsh rasp. Kept me alive when Vorlag's poison sought to finish me. It was the truth, or part of it, the part I could admit. I conveniently left out Fang's insistence about her. In fact, I wasn't sure what to make of the strange solace her presence seemed to grant my tormented wolf. Still, even that partial truth felt like a betrayal of some unspoken Lycan code, relying on a wolfless, unthinkable. More importantly, how would the Elder Council react? Their summons, I knew, would be swift, merciless. They'd want answers. They'd want to see if their king was still fit to rule, and they'd definitely want to know about the wolfless shadow at his heels. Did they ever just trust their alpha? Or was everything a test, a constant probing for weakness? The air in the outpost was thick with unspoken judgments, with the scent of fear. And with Rinna's alien starlight and earth presence, a stark contrast to the familiar musk of my pack, my den. And yet, I felt like an intruder, in my own home. As if summoned by my thoughts, a stern-faced warrior entered, his gaze fixing on me. Alpha King Kalen, the Elder Council awaits your presence, and the Wolfless One is to accompany you. Of course they did. The wolves were ready to pass judgment. Following that summons, the walk to the council chamber felt like a mile through broken glass. Every Nightclaw wolf we passed either averted their gaze in discomfort or stared with open, hostile curiosity. And then, Rinna, walking silently beside me, seemed to shrink under the weight of their collective disdain. I couldn't blame her. My pack, usually a source of immense pride and strength, now felt like a gallery of accusers. Truth be told, I felt a flicker of something. Protective. For her, the thought, so alien, so contrary to my ingrained prejudice, I almost stumbled. Fang, however, rumbled a low note of approval. Traitor. But then, what was I supposed to feel? She had saved my life, hadn't she? Even if her methods were unnatural. The council chamber, a cavernous, torch-lit space, dominated by a crescent table where 5 grim-faced elders sat, their eyes like chips of ancient ice. The air was heavy with the scent of old stone, old power, and their palpable disapproval. They were the guardians of our laws, the embodiment of tradition, and because of that, they were also the most resistant to anything new, anything different. Like a wolfless girl who somehow soothed an Alpha King's spirit. To make things worse, my own weakness was on full display. I stood before them, not as the conquering hero, but as a survivor, leaning more heavily than I liked on the staff Liam had provided. Alpha King Kalen, Elder Theron, the eldest and most formidable, began, his voice like grinding stones. You returned to us, diminished, and with company. His gaze flicked to Rinna, dismissing her as less than dust. Explain. The interrogation was brutal, about the ambush, about my injuries, about Vorlag's strength, about the unsettling magic Liam had mentioned. More importantly, about Rinna. She is an outcast, I stated, my voice tight. She found me. Her knowledge of certain herbs, it aided my recovery when Lycan healing failed against purifier poisons. A half-truth. Her presence. Her spirit. That was what had done it. But how could I explain that to these wolves of tradition and brute strength? In fact, I didn't understand it myself. As the silence stretched, Theron's gaze sharpened on Rinna. A wolfless, possessing such knowledge. Or is it something more, Alpha King? Some other influence? His tone, laden with suspicion, hinting at dark magic, at curses. The tension in the room became a living thing, suffocating. And then, just as Theron was about to press further, his voice rising with accusation, A subtle shift occurred, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer in the air around Rinna, a wave of calm. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a blast of power. Rather, it was like the oppressive weight in the room lessened by a fraction. Theron, mid-word, faltered, a flicker of confusion crossing his harsh features. The other elders stirred, glancing at each other. Even Fang within me seemed to let out a sigh of relief. What was that? Did anyone else feel it? Or was I, in my weakened state, imagining things? This girl, Rinna, what was she? The moment passed as quickly as it came, the tension reasserting itself. But the seed of an even deeper mystery had been planted, a tiny, unseen spark in the suffocating judgment of the council. My world, it had just tilted again. Theron, recovering his composure, his eyes now holding a new, sharper glint of suspicion directed solely at Rinna, declared, "The Wolfless will be watched. And you, Kaelin, you will prove your fitness to lead, soon." The unspoken threat hung heavy, making it clear that my new reality was not just about survival, but about a battle for my throne, with this enigmatic girl somehow at its very center. Following Theron's ominous declaration, the days that followed were tense, like a drawn bowstring, ready to snap. The Elder Council watched my every move, their disapproval a suffocating blanket. And then, there was Rinna, watched even more closely. Truth be told, and I found myself watching her too. A lot. Fang, my wolf, was a constant, possessive rumble beneath my skin whenever another male even glanced her way too long. A low growl would escape my lips before I could stop it. Pathetic. Me, the Alpha King, acting like a green pup with his first infatuation. Because of that, I tried to keep my distance, to maintain a facade of regal indifference. But it was hard. Damn hard. Her scent, that impossible mix of earth and starlight, it was everywhere, a phantom touch on my senses. Despite that internal turmoil, Ilara, that ancient sharp-eyed crone, had taken Rinna under her wing. I'd see them in the secluded training yard, Ilara gesturing, Rinna listening intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. Soon after, I started noticing things. A faint shimmer around Rinna when she focused. The air near her sometimes felt lighter, cleaner, like after a spring rain. What was Ilara teaching her? What was this spirit weaver nonsense the old woman muttered about? Legends, superstitions. That's what I'd always believed. But then, I'd seen that flicker of something in the council chamber, hadn't I? Maybe it was fate that Ilara, one of the few who still whispered of the old ways, was here to guide her. More importantly, Rinna wasn't just existing, she was trying. I saw the exhaustion on her face after her sessions with Ilara, the slight tremor in her hands. Yet, there was a new light in her eyes too. A spark, a flicker of, what? Hope? Resolve? It was infuriatingly intriguing. In fact, one evening I saw her practicing alone, by the old weirwood tree at the edge of the den. Her hands were outstretched, palms up, and for a breathless moment, a soft, silver-gold luminescence bloomed between them, a tiny captive star. It was gone in an instant. She looked around, startled, as if she'd felt my gaze even from a distance, before she could move. I stepped back into the shadows, my heart hammering a strange rhythm. What in the blighted lands was she? And why did the sight of her wielding that soft, impossible light make Fang purr? This was getting complicated. Far too complicated. News arrived via a shaken scout. Vorlag's warbands were on the move, not just raiding, but searching. Their movements, erratic, but a pattern was emerging. They were pushing closer to Nightclaw territory, their inquiries specific. They were looking for something, or someone. A cold dread settled in my gut. They weren't just coming for me anymore. Were they? They were coming for her, for the light I'd just seen her hold. Following that chilling news, the attack came. Not with the roar of a war party, but with the silence of assassins. And then, in the dead of night, while the den slept under a sliver of a new moon, they struck. Purifiers. Their spiritual deadness, a suffocating wave that hit me even before their physical presence. They weren't after me, not directly. Truth be told, their target was sickeningly clear from the moment their shadows slipped past my personal guard. Who fought like demons but were overwhelmed by the sheer silent ferocity and dark tools of these fanatics? No matter how hard she tried to remain unseen in the chaos, Rinna was their focus. I saw it. The glint of a poisoned obsidian dagger aimed for her heart as she tried to flee her small assigned chamber. Without thinking, my body moved. Instinct, a roar, ripped from my chest, a sound not entirely human, not entirely wolf, but something more, something primal. Fang exploded to the surface, a black hurricane of fur and fury. The world narrowed to that single horrifying image, Rinna, her eyes wide with terror, the assassin lunging. In the span of a breath, I was across the intervening space, a blur of motion. I hit the purifier like a battering ram, sending him flying. Pain lanced through me as another's dark blade scored my side, but it was nothing, compared to the absolute incandescent rage that consumed me. Because of that rage, because of Fang's desperate, possessive howl echoing in my soul, the words tore from me, a vow sealed in blood and moonlight, booming through the chaos for all to hear, friend and foe alike. She is mine. What followed was a blur of savage combat. I was the Alpha King, a force of nature, Fang reveling in the carnage, tearing through the assassins. But then, Rinna. She wasn't just cowering. As one purifier tried to get past me, his eyes fixed on her with that same dead-eyed zeal, a brilliant shield of silver-gold light flared around her, knocking him back, hissing like water on fire. Between one breath and the next, she was a beacon in the darkness, her spirit lashing out, not with claws, but with pure incandescent power that made the purifiers recoil, their dark energies visibly disrupted. My wolfless outcast, I was a warrior of light. And just like that, everything changed. My mind, my heart, my very soul. It all snapped into a terrifying, exhilarating alignment. She was mine, not as a possession, but as the other half of my spirit. The thought, a revelation, a brand seared onto my being. We fought back to back, my primal strength and her ethereal power a devastating, impossible dance. The remaining assassins, broken, stunned by a power they clearly hadn't anticipated, fled into the night, leaving behind their dead. And a silence, filled only with our ragged breathing, and the echoing thunder of my claim. As the adrenaline faded, I turned to Rinna, her light dimming, her body swaying with exhaustion, and I saw not just an outcast, but my fated, impossible mate. The woman I had just irrevocably claimed before my entire shocked den. The consequences of that roar, they were about to crash down upon us. Following the assassin's retreat, the den erupted, not in cheers, not yet. Instead, there was a stunned, heavy silence, broken only by the whimpers of the wounded and the sharp, indrawn breaths of my warriors as they stared at me, at Rinna, who was leaning against a doorframe, pale but resolute, the last vestiges of her light clinging to her like moondust. And then, the whispers began, spreading like wildfire through the assembled Nightclaw. He claimed her. A wolfless? What magic was that? My public declaration, torn from the depths of my soul by Fang's primal certainty, now hung in the air, an undeniable, irrevocable fact. Truth be told, a part of me, the kingly strategic part, was already calculating the political fallout. The Elder Council would be apoplectic, rivals would see it as weakness. But then, another part, the alpha, the mate, felt a grim, possessive satisfaction. She was mine, and I would protect what was mine. Liam was at my side instantly, his face a mixture of shock, concern, and something akin to awe as he glanced at Rinna. "Kaelin, your claim was absolute," I cut him off, my voice still rough with the aftermath of battle and the lingering power of Fang. I turned to face my pack, my gaze sweeping over them, challenging any to dispute it. Because of that stand, a ripple of unease went through them, but also a grudging respect. They knew the sanctity of an alpha's true claim, even if this one shattered every tradition. Elara appeared, her ancient eyes fixed on Rinna with an unreadable intensity. I suspected she understood more than anyone. Moments later, the pack betrayer, Marcus, could be seen at the edge of the crowd, his face a mask of controlled outrage, no doubt already plotting how to use this. An open loop, his treachery, that needed closing. More importantly, I walked to Rinna. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, searching. That fear was still there, but now it was mixed with a dawning confusion, perhaps even a fragile hope. Her heart skipped. I was sure of it, just as mine did. "You are under my protection, Rinna," I stated, my voice softer now, but no less firm. "No one will harm you." It was a vow, a promise. Not only that, but a declaration to my entire pack. She was no longer just an outcast I'd brought back. She was mine. Whether she, or I, or the damn council liked it, we were now bound by more than circumstance. We were in an alliance, forged in blood and unexpected light. What's worse, or perhaps better, Vorlag now knew exactly who she was, and what she meant to me. His next move would be calculated to strike at that very bond. Did she understand the chains that now linked us? Heavier than any iron. Before either could speak further, a messenger arrived, pale, breathless. "Alpha King, an envoy from Vorlag. He demands an audience. He says he comes to discuss the abomination you shelter." The challenge was thrown. The air crackled with new tension. Vorlag wasn't just hunting anymore. He was confronting. My claim had forced his hand, and now, the fate of my pack, my throne, and the wolfless spirit weaver who was inexplicably mine, hung precariously in the balance. The true battle, it was only just beginning. Following the arrival of Vorlag's envoy, that chilling demand hanging in the air like a death shroud, something inside me just snapped. Not in a bad way. No, more like a lock finally giving way, a heavy chain breaking. I stood before my elder council, Rinna a quiet shadow just behind my shoulder, her presence a steady warmth against my back. That envoy, that slime-licking dog of Vorlag's, had wanted her. The abomination, he'd called her. And then I felt Fang, my wolf, rise within me, not in a snarl of rage, but in a surge of pure, unadulterated possession. He was done with my human dithering. So was I. "Tell Vorlag," I heard my own voice, deeper than usual, resonating with an alpha power that had nothing to do with my throne, and everything to do with the woman behind me. "That the Nightclaw Dominion does not bow. Rinna is under my protection. She is mine." The word echoed. Mine. Not a desperate cry like the Night of the Assassins, no. This was a statement of fact, unshakable. Truth be told, I was tired. So damn tired of fighting what my soul, what Fang had known from the moment her strange starlight scent had first hit my senses in that miserable hut. She was my mate, my queen. Because of that, a strength I hadn't felt since before the ambush, before the poison, surged through me. It felt good, right. Meanwhile, I saw Rinna, watched her in the days that followed my decree. She sought out Elara, that wise old crone, and there was a new fire in her eyes, a burning resolve. I'd catch glimpses of them in the training yard, Ilara gesturing with those gnarled hands, speaking in low tones. Soon after, Rinna would practice alone, her small hands weaving patterns of soft, silver-gold light in the twilight. Light that pulsed with life, with a power that felt as ancient as the mountains themselves. In fact, in our shared dreams, they were more intense now, weren't they? Images of weavers of old, their Lycan guardians, their spirits intertwined, and the soul echoes. Sometimes when she was training, I'd feel a faint echo of her exhaustion, and when my own wounds ached, I'd sense a flicker of her concern across the den. What was this bond, this invisible thread that tied my alpha soul to a wolfless spirit weaver? Maybe it was fate, this impossible, undeniable connection. I faced the elders again, their faces like stone masks. Theron tried to argue, to invoke ancient laws, to speak of curses and ill omens. You invite destruction, Kaelin, for a... She is the spirit weaver of Nightclaw, I cut him off, my voice like ice. And she is our future. If you cannot see that, then you are as blind as Vorlag. I was drawing lines in the sand, wasn't I? Burning bridges. But then, looking at Rinna, watching her tentative light grow stronger each day, I knew this was the only way. My path. Our path. How could I have ever doubted Fang's certainty? The envoy had carried my defiance back to Vorlag. The silence that followed from his war camp was more ominous than any threat. A gathering storm about to break. War was coming, swift and certain as a winter avalanche, and the first tremors of Vorlag's rage wouldn't be long in making themselves felt across our borders. Following my bold defiance, Vorlag didn't declare all-out war, not immediately. Instead, he sent a message, written in blood and fire. A week later, a magically unsettling fog, thick as grave dirt and twice as cold, rolled into our lower territories. And then, his purifiers struck, a specialized unit, silent and deadly as vipers, hitting a vital supply outpost near the border. They weren't just raiding, they were slaughtering. A clear message of what awaited any who sheltered an abomination. Truth be told, as I led my warriors to retaliate, a cold dread twisted in my gut. The attack was too precise, too knowledgeable of our defenses. That old nagging suspicion of a traitor. It clawed at me again. We hit them hard. Fang, a blur of black fury at my side. Our movements synchronized, a dance of death. But then, I saw him. Marcus, one of my most trusted strategists. A wolf I'd shared kills with, bled with. He was near a supposedly collapsed tunnel exit, one the Purifiers were now using as an escape route. His posture, wrong, not fighting, observing, without warning, as a group of Purifiers feigned retreat towards that tunnel, drawing some of my best warriors into a potential trap. Marcus made a subtle hand gesture, a signal. My blood ran cold. Because of that one, almost imperceptible movement, I knew. The serpent in our midst. A roar of pure, betrayed fury ripped from my throat. Marcus! I launched myself at him, ignoring the fleeing Purifiers for a moment. The confrontation, short, vicious. He tried to lie, to feign confusion, but Fang scented the reek of his deceit, the underlying tang of Purifier magic clinging to his furs. She's a curse, Alpha, he'd finally snarled, his eyes wide with a fanatic's fear. She'll bring ruin. Ruin or salvation. More importantly, Rinna, who I'd ordered to stay with Ilara and a heavy guard back at a fortified position. She seemed to sense the shift, the critical danger. As if pulled by a string, her light flared. Not miles away, but here. A distant pulse that somehow reached the battlefield. It wasn't a direct attack, not from that distance. Rather, it was like a wave of clarity, of spiritual reinforcement. It washed over my loyal warriors, steadying their nerves, sharpening their senses, while the remaining Purifiers faltered, visibly discomfited by the unseen spiritual pressure. How did she do that? This power of hers, it was more than I could comprehend. In that moment, Even amidst the chaos and the sting of betrayal, a fierce pride surged through me. My mate, my spirit weaver. What followed was us mopping up the last of Vorlag's dogs, their coordinated attack shattered by Marcus's exposure and Rinna's unseen aid. Why did they always think they could break what was fated? Marcus was dragged away in chains, his howls of righteous betrayal echoing hollowly. The victory was ours, but the taste was bitter. The price of my defiance was being paid in Nightclaw blood, and the serpent within had been unmasked. The fog lifted, revealing the devastation, and as I looked towards the direction of the den, where Rinna was, I knew this was just a prelude. Vorlag would not be so easily deterred, and Marcus's treachery hinted at deeper cracks within my own pack. Cracks that needed mending before the true storm hit. Following the skirmish and Marcus's capture, an uneasy pall settled over the Nightclaw dominion. The taste of betrayal, a poison, making my wolves edgy, suspicious. And then, our scouts returned, their faces grim, their scent laced with fear. Vorlag's main army. It was on the move, a vast dark tide flowing towards our borders. Days now, not weeks, all-out war. Truth be told, a part of me welcomed it. The waiting, the anticipation, it was a torment worse than any battle. At least in battle, you knew your enemy. Because of that grim certainty, a strange sort of calm settled over me. There was no more doubt, no more fighting Fang's insistence or my own heart. Rinna was my mate, my future, and I would burn the world to keep her safe. I found her in the training yard with Alara. The old she-wolf was pushing her hard. Rinna moved with a newfound grace, her small hands weaving intricate patterns of that silver-gold light. Her brow furrowed in concentration. Her aura. It was stronger now, wasn't it? A palpable presence that soothed the agitation in my own spirit, even from a distance. Maybe it was fate that had brought this wolfless spirit weaver to my broken kingdom, to my broken self. Still, the shadow of the coming war was a heavy cloak around her shoulders. When our eyes met, the world seemed to still. The clamor of the den, the preparations for battle, it all faded. There was only her light, her impossible courage. More importantly, I didn't speak of war councils or defensive formations. Instead, I walked to her, my heart, that old scarred muscle, aching with a tenderness I hadn't known I was capable of. "Rinna," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. I reached out, my calloused fingers gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her sweat-dampened temple. The moment our eyes locked, her breath hitched. That familiar fear was still there, deep in her gaze, a shadow of a lifetime of rejection. But beneath it, something new, a fragile trust, a dawning hope, and it shattered the last of my reservations. I started, the words I needed to say, the apology for my blindness, for my cruelty, forming a lump in my throat. How do you tell someone your soul recognizes theirs, even when your mind was too stubborn to see? Her voice trembled when she whispered my name. Kaelin? Not Alpha King. Just Kaelin. Before either of us could speak further, I pulled her into my arms, fierce, desperate. A silent vow against the darkness that was about to crash down on us. I buried my face in her hair, her unique scent of earth and starlight filling me, centering me. Mine. The word wasn't a claim of ownership anymore. It was a statement of belonging. My soul. To hers. The mating bite. The true, sacred joining. It felt inevitable now. A promise hanging in the charged air between us, as tangible as the coming dawn. What would tomorrow bring? Death? Or the start of something new? Something powerful enough to change our world. As if the world narrowed to just us, to the frantic beat of our hearts. I held her. The war drums of the Nightclaw beginning their somber, defiant rhythm in the distance. The time for waiting was over. The first war horn split the twilight, a long, mournful cry that echoed off the mountains, and as Rinna trembled in my arms, I knew Vorlag was here. The battle for our survival, for our love, for the very soul of the Lycan people was about to begin. The war horns, and then the world dissolved. A nightmare of blood, iron, and screams. Vorlag's army crashed against our defenses like a black tide, his purifiers at the vanguard, their eyes burning with that dead, zealous light. They moved with an unholy coordination, their attacks not just aimed at flesh but at the very spirit of my Nightclaw warriors. Truth be told, their dark arts, the way they seemed to deaden the air and instill a creeping spiritual dread. It was unlike anything I'd faced before. Fang roared within me, a maelstrom of protective fury, and I met them head-on, my claws and teeth tearing through their ranks. Rinna, she was a beacon beside me, her silver gold light a shield, a balm, a burning rebuke to their darkness. Her spirit lashes cracked like whips of pure energy, sending purifiers reeling. For a while, a desperate, glorious while, it felt like we could hold them, like we were the storm. But then, Vorlag himself appeared, a monstrous black wolf, larger than any Lycan I'd ever seen. His eyes, twin pits of cold fire, and in his claws, or rather, wielded by his most elite guards who flanked him, was the Weaver's Bane. It wasn't a simple chain as I'd imagined from Ilara's tales. No, it was a construct of obsidian and dark, twisted iron, pulsing with a sickening anti-light. More importantly, its mere presence sent a wave of spiritual nausea through me, and I felt Rinna falter, her own light dimming for a precious, terrible instant. Because of that opening, Vorlag seized his chance. He didn't engage me directly. Instead, with a guttural command, his elite purifiers created a diversion, a brutal, sacrificial push against my flank, drawing my attention, drawing Fang's rage. What followed was a moment of pure, calculated horror. Without warning, as I was tearing the throat out of one of his lieutenants, a net woven from those same dark, spirit-dampening materials ensnared Rinna. She cried out, her voice a raw sound of shock and pain that ripped through my soul. Before I could move, before I could reach her, they had the Weaver's Bane around her wrists, around her throat, her beautiful light, her fierce spiritual fire. It didn't just dim, it strangled, sputtered, and then, with a final agonizing pulse that I felt like a physical blow to my own heart, it vanished, extinguished. To make things worse, her body went limp, her eyes wide with a pain that was more than physical. The life force, it was being leached from her. My Rinna, my mate, gone. Just like that. The world stopped. My world, anyway. Vorlag's laughter, a harsh, triumphant bark, echoed across the blood-soaked battlefield. He had her. He had my light. A roar of unimaginable agony and fury tore from my throat, a sound that was all Fang, all broken alpha. As I lunged towards Vorlag and the monsters who held my silenced mate, the true battle for her soul just beginning. Following Rinna's capture, and the silencing of her light, something inside me shattered. The careful control, the strategic mind of the Alpha King, gone. And then, there was only Fang, a primal storm of grief and apocalyptic rage unleashed. I became a whirlwind of black fur and death, tearing through purifier ranks, no longer fighting for a battlefield, but for the stolen pieces of my soul. My warriors, seeing Rinna fall, seeing their alpha consumed by a righteous, terrifying fury, fought with the desperation of the damned. Truth be told, for a mad, glorious stretch we pushed them back, my fangs dripping with their tainted blood. Every kill a hollow echo of the one true target, Vorlag. But then, he was too well guarded. his purifiers forming a living wall around him, and my captive, broken Rinna. Despite that desperate surge, the spiritual dread their dark arts exuded, now unopposed by Rinna's light, began to take its toll. My wolves faltered, their inner spirits battered, their resilience crumbling. The Weaver's bane. Its effect wasn't just on Rinna. Its oppressive aura weakened all connected to the spiritual side of lycanthropy. My own connection to Fang, feeling frayed, stretched thin. More importantly, Vorlag was a cunning strategist. He used Rinna's capture, her visible suffering, as a psychological weapon, parading her before his lines. Her limp form a testament to his power. Each glimpse of her, pale and still, was another dagger in my heart, another crack in my resolve. How could I fight when my very reason for fighting was broken? Eventually, the sheer numbers, the dark magic, and my own rapidly depleting strength began to tell. I took a hit. Another. A dark iron blade, enchanted to cause lingering spiritual agony, bit deep into my shoulder. Fang howled, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain that echoed not just in my mind but across the battlefield. A lament that made even the hardened Purifiers pause for a heartbeat. What followed was Liam, his face a grim mask of loyalty and despair, dragging me back from the brink of a suicidal charge. His voice hoarse. "Alpha, we must fall back. We can't lose you too. Not now." Lose me too? Had they already lost Rinna? The thought, an abyss. What's worse? I could barely stand. The poison from the blade was working fast, my vision blurring, my own wolf spirit feeling diminished, defeated. Could an alpha exist without his queen? Without the other half of his soul? The silence from Fang, usually so vibrant, was terrifying. With a final agonizing look at where Rinna was being held, a distant, unresponsive figure, I allowed Liam and my remaining guard to pull me from the field. Each step, a failure. Each breath, a betrayal of her. We retreated into the shadowed crags of our deepest mountain defenses, the sounds of Vorlag's triumphant howls a bitter poison in the wind, leaving me with nothing but the taste of ash, blood, and the soul-crushing silence where Rinna's light used to be. Following that devastating retreat, the days blurred into a suffocating gray. We were holed up in the heart of the mountain, the den eerily silent, the scent of defeat thick as grave dust. And then, there was me, a king without a queen, an alpha whose soul felt amputated. I sat in the cold darkness of my private chamber, the great stone throne a mockery. Fang was quiet, so quiet. A wounded animal licking its wounds in the deepest recesses of my being, his usual vibrant connection to me a dull, throbbing ache. Truth be told, his silence was worse than any howl of pain. It was the silence of utter despair. My fault. All my fault. If I hadn't been so blind, so stubborn in my prejudice against Rinna for so long, if I'd embraced our bond sooner, protected her better. But then, if-onlys. They were the bitter fare of defeated kings. Despite that crushing guilt, I replayed every moment, Rinna's gentle strength, the hesitant bloom of her power, the courage in her eyes when she'd stood against assassins, against the council, against me, the way her starlight scent had somehow completed me. More importantly, the echo of her spiritual agony when the Weaver's bane had taken her, that still resonated through our severed bond, a constant ghostly torment. Was she even alive? Vorlag was not known for his mercy, especially towards those he deemed abominations. The thought of what he might be doing to her, it was a fresh wave of nausea, of helpless fury. In fact, I tried to reach out with my mind, with Fang's senses, through the bond, but there was only a horrifying, echoing void where her light used to be. Had the bane truly extinguished her spirit, or was she just too far gone for me to reach. Maybe it was fate that I was meant to suffer this, to understand the true cost of my pride. Ilara and Liam tried to speak to me, to offer words of hope, of strategy. Still, I barely heard them. What strategy was there when your heart had been ripped out? What hope when your fated mate was in the clutches of a monster, her spirit broken? My warriors looked to me for leadership, for strength. Yet, all I felt was a vast hollow emptiness. I, Kalen Volkov, the great Alpha King, was a failure, a fraud. The core emotional question that had haunted me, could our bond redefine wholeness, now seemed to have a brutal, final answer. It had only brought ruin. How do you lead a pack when your own soul is lost in the darkness, with no light to guide the way back? That night, as a sliver of a dead moon cast long, sorrowful shadows across my chamber, I finally let out a sound, not a roar, not a howl of defiance, just a broken, animalistic cry of pure, unadulterated grief. For my lost Rinna, for my silenced Fang, for a future that had been stolen before it had even truly begun. In the deepest pit of that despair, as silence threatened to consume everything, a flicker, so faint, I almost dismissed it as a trick of my grief-addled mind, an echo, not of pain this time, but of something else, a whisper of defiance from across the void. Or was it just the last desperate hopes of a dying wolf, of a dying, following that broken cry in the darkness, an answering silence, deeper, colder. For days I was a ghost in my own stronghold, Fang a withered ember in my soul. The pack looked at me with pity, with fear, their Alpha King shattered. And then, just as I was about to let the last vestiges of hope drown in the bitter sea of my guilt, it came. A flicker, so faint, so fragile. I thought my grief-addled mind had conjured it. But it was there, a whisper across the ravaged bond, like a single star piercing an endless night. Rinna. Not her pain this time. No. Something else. A thread of defiance. A spark of her unyielding spirit, somehow pushing through the void left by the Weaver's bane. Kalen. Her name wasn't spoken, but I felt it. A silent call, a desperate plea, and a promise. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just the sheer, stubborn refusal of a mate's soul to be extinguished. Whatever it was, that tiny echo ignited something within me. Within Fang, he stirred, a low growl building from the depths of his despair, not of anguish this time, but of nascent, rekindled fury. She lives. The thought, a lightning strike, jolting me back to life. Our mate fights. Because of that, the suffocating gray began to recede. My Rinna, still in Vorlag's clutches, still suffering, but alive and fighting. How could I do any less? Why, truth be told, her strength, even in what I imagined were her darkest hours, shamed my own wallowing. Soon after, I sought out Ilara and Liam. They found me not in the throne room, but in the training yard. My body aching, my movements stiff, but driving myself through combat drills with a desperate intensity. Ilara's ancient eyes, when they saw me, held a flicker of grim understanding. "You felt her?" she asked, her voice raspy. I nodded, words unnecessary. "What do we know of the Weaver's bane, Ilara? Truly know? Can its effects be undone?" This was an open loop I desperately needed to close. Ilara sighed, a sound like autumn leaves skittering over stone. "It is a device of pure spiritual suppression, Alpha, designed to silence, to break. But the Spirit Weaver lineage, it is older than the Purifiers, older than their hate. Its roots run deep, into the very heart of life. If her spirit still fights..." She paused, a flicker of something unreadable in her gaze. "There might be a way, a desperate gamble." What gamble? What hope could there be against such a dark power? The spark Rinna had sent, It was more than hope. It was a command, a challenge. And by the spirits of my ancestors, I would answer. My resolve, as hard and sharp as newly forged steel, now had a direction. And as I looked at the grim, determined faces of Liam and Alara, I knew that Vorlag's victory was not yet absolute. The Nightclaw still had fangs, and its alpha was about to bear them. Following that fragile spark of connection, the den, or what was left of our fighting spirit, began to coalesce around a new, desperate purpose. And then, Alara revealed her gamble. Vorlag plans a ritual, she rasped, her eyes dark with ancient knowledge. The blood moon approaches. He intends to use Rinna's life force, her spirit weaver essence, in a blasphemous purifier rite, to either corrupt it for his own power or to extinguish it utterly, breaking the weaver lineage forever. Truth be told, if he succeeds, it will be a devastating blow not just to her but to the spiritual balance of all Lycan kind. A shiver of cold dread traced its way down my spine. We didn't have much time. How could one wolf, even an alpha, stand against such a tide of darkness and fanaticism? Despite that grim prognosis, a plan began to form, born of desperation, and Ilara's obscure lore. It was madness, a suicide mission most likely. Infiltrate Vorlag's fortress, a place bristling with his fanatical purifiers, reach Rinna, and somehow sever her from the Weaver's bane before the blood moon reached its zenith. Because of that urgency, every moment counted. Liam, my ever-loyal beta, pledged his strength, his scent a mix of grim determination and brotherly concern. Seraphina, her eyes blazing with a cold fury for what had been done to Rinna and our pack, offered her unmatched tracking and infiltration skills. And Alara, she spoke of ancient wards, of spiritual weak points in purifier defenses, of a counter-ritual that might disrupt the Bane's hold, if Rinna's own spirit was strong enough to fight from within. More importantly was it would require me, my alpha essence, my bond with Rinna, to be the conduit, the anchor. Could I do it? Could we do it? In fact, there was no other choice. To sit and wait was to condemn Rinna to a fate worse than death. We do it, I said, my voice flat, devoid of doubt. Fang surged in agreement, a silent promise of vengeance and rescue. My past prejudices, my stupid, prideful blindness regarding Rinna, they were ashes now, burned away by the crucible of loss and this new, terrifying hope. What followed was hours of intense, whispered planning, mapping Vorlag's fortress based on Seraphina's daring reconnaissance, Ilara chanting over ancient talismans, her movements slow and deliberate, Liam checking our meager weapons, his jaw set. Still, the weight of what we were about to attempt pressed down on us all. What were a handful of desperate wolves against an army of fanatics and their dark lord? Yet, we had something Vorlag didn't count on. A bond he couldn't break, a love he couldn't comprehend, and a spirit weaver whose light, however suppressed, refused to be extinguished. As we prepared to leave under the cloak of the deepest night, Ilara pressed a small, cold stone into my hand. For Rinna, she whispered, a focus. If her spirit can find it, it may help. With the fate of my mate, and the spiritual heart of my people hanging in the balance, we slipped from the Nightclaw den like shadows. Our desperate gambit underway, each footfall a prayer against the encroaching darkness of the blood moon. Following our departure from the den, the forest was a labyrinth, menacing shadows, watchful unseen eyes. The blood moon, a baleful crimson eye in the inky sky, was climbing, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like specters around us. And then, with every step, the oppressive spiritual deadness of Vorlag's territory grew stronger, a choking miasma that made Fang pace restlessly beneath my skin. Truth be told, even the air felt tainted, heavy with the metallic tang of purifier magic, and the silent screams of a land under a zealot's heel. Seraphina moved like a ghost, guiding us through hidden game trails, around purifier patrols, her senses stretched to their absolute limit. Liam was a silent, steady presence at my back, his hand never far from the hilt of his blade. Ilara, despite her age, kept pace, her breath a thin, determined whisper. Despite that oppressive atmosphere, my focus was singular. Rinna, the faint echo of her spirit, that spark of defiance I'd felt. It was my compass, my lodestar in this encroaching darkness. I clung to it, fueling my resolve. Could she feel us coming? Was she still fighting? The questions, a torment. Because of that uncertainty, the silence of our passage was broken only by the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a lone wolf, friend or foe, who could say, and the frantic thumping of my own heart. More importantly, Ilara had warned us. Vorlag's ritual would likely begin as the blood moon reached its zenith, its unholy light empowering his dark arts, making Rinna most vulnerable. We were racing against the very turning of the heavens. In fact, as we drew closer to Vorlag's dark stone fortress, a brutal scar upon the mountainside, reeking of fear and cold iron, the spiritual pressure intensified. I could feel the Weaver's bane, even from a distance, a cold, leeching presence that sought to drain hope, to extinguish light. What followed was a near miss, a heavily armed patrol, forcing us into a dank, narrow ravine, the scent of decay thick around us. For a breathless moment, I thought we were discovered. Still, Seraphina's skill, her knowledge of these blighted lands, guided us through. What's worse, I could now feel Rinna's spirit more clearly, not as a beacon of strength, but as a flickering candle in a hurricane, her pain a sharp stabbing echo in my own soul. She was close, and she was suffering. The thought of Vorlag laying his filthy hands on her, using her pure spirit for his depraved ritual, it sent a fresh wave of murderous rage through me, so potent that Fang let out an involuntary low, "Girl!" Liam shot me a warning glance. I had to control it. For her. As the blood moon climbed higher, its crimson light bathing the jagged peaks in an infernal glow. We finally reached the outer walls of Vorlag's stronghold. The air was thick with the chanting of Purifiers, a guttural, unholy sound that made my skin crawl. We were here, at the heart of the beast's lair. And as I looked at the impenetrable walls, the heavily guarded gates, and felt the terrifying power of the ritual already beginning to build within, I knew. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was a desperate plunge into the very jaws of hell, with only a sliver of hope to light our way. Following our arrival at Vorlag's unholy ritual site, the scene that greeted us, a nightmare. Rinna, my Rinna, chained to a dark, obsidian altar, the Weaver's bane pulsing with a sickening anti-light around her throat, her spirit, a fragile, flickering candle against the overwhelming darkness. Vorlag stood before her chanting in the guttural tongue of the Purifiers, the blood moon casting an infernal glow upon his monstrous wolf form. He was drawing her essence, her beautiful light, into himself. And then, he saw us. His eyes, twin pits of malice, narrowed. The Alpha King arrives, just in time to witness the purification of his tainted mate, and the dawn of my new era. His roar, a blasphemy. Fang, my wolf, answered with a promise of bloody vengeance. Without thinking, I launched myself forward, Liam and Seraphina flanking me. Ilara already beginning a counter-chant, her voice surprisingly strong, weaving a shield of ancient power. The battle, instant, brutal. His elite purifiers met us, their iron weapons clashing against our desperate fury. Truth be told, they were strong, fanatical, their dark arts seeking to smother our spirits. But then, Rinna, even chained, even with the bane dimming her, she fought. I saw her eyes find mine, and across the chaos, across the pain, our bond flared. A searing, incandescent connection. The small, cold stone Ilara had given me, which I'd managed to get to Rinna during a feint by Seraphina, began to glow in her bound hand. Maybe it was fate, or her incredible spirit. but a pulse of her familiar silver-gold light, weak but there, pushed against the Bane's oppressive aura. "Kaelin!" Her voice, a raw cry, reached me. In that moment, I knew what I had to do, what we had to do. The mating bite, the true union. It wasn't just a ritual. Ilara had whispered it was a conduit, a way for an alpha and his mate to share, to amplify their deepest strengths, especially when one was a spirit weaver. Could it break the Bane? Could it save her? It was our only chance. Because of that, I fought my way to her. Every blow I landed, every wound I took, fueled by that singular, desperate purpose. Eventually, through a haze of blood and agony, I reached her. Vorlag lunged, his fangs bared. But then, Rinna's light, fed by our bond, by the focus stone, surged. It wasn't just defensive now, it was a cleansing fire, pushing back Vorlag's darkness, as if pulled by a string. I lowered my head, my fangs finding the soft skin of her throat. Not in violence, but in the sacred ancient rite. The moment my teeth pierced her skin, a cataclysmic explosion of power. Our power erupted. Her light, my alpha strength, Fang's primal essence, all merged into a blinding, purifying nova. It shattered the Weaver's bane, the dark artifact crumbling to dust. And then, Rinna, truly Rinna again, her eyes blazing with starlight, rose with me. Our combined aura a radiant shield. Vorlag screamed, not in triumph, but in terror. As our united power, the perfect balance of spirit and Fang, bore down on him, he never stood a chance. His dark form was consumed, unmade, leaving only a fading stain of shadow on the bloodied stone. The silence that fell was profound, broken only by our ragged breaths. The blood moon above now seeming to bless, not curse. As Rinna collapsed against me, her light now a soft, steady glow, I knew we had won more than just a battle. We had reclaimed our future. Our bond sealed not just in love, but in the very fabric of a new dawn. Following Vorlag's annihilation, the dawn broke, gray and tentative at first, then painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, a stark contrast to the blood-soaked ground of his fallen fortress. And then, the true cost of the battle began to sink in. My Nightclaw warriors, those who had survived our desperate gambit and the earlier assaults, were battered, their spirits weary, but a new light of victory, of hope, in their eyes. Rinna, leaning heavily against me, her own strength nearly spent, began to move among them. Truth be told, her touch, her soft words, her very presence, now unhindered by the bane, was a balm. She couldn't knit flesh like a traditional healer, no. Instead, she mended spirits. She soothed the spiritual poisons left by purifier blades, coaxed flickering life forces back from the brink. Her silver-gold aura a gentle, pervasive warmth that allowed our pack's natural Lycan healing to work its wonders. Fang, within me, hummed with a deep, resonant contentment watching her. Our queen, he projected, his voice filled with an awe I now fully shared. Despite that exhaustion, there was work to be done. We hunted down the few remaining purifiers who had scattered like rats, ensuring Vorlag's dark creed would not easily rise again. Liam, his arm in a sling but his eyes clear, coordinated the efforts, his quiet strength a pillar. Seraphina, her face smudged with dirt and grief for fallen comrades, began the grim task of accounting for our losses. More importantly, Ilara, looking 1,000 years old but with a spark of fierce joy in her eyes, gathered the fragments of the shattered Weaver's bane, her expression unreadable. What would become of that broken evil? An open loop, perhaps, for another time. Because of Rinna's presence, because of the undeniable miracle of Vorlag's defeat at the hands of an Alpha King and his wolfless mate. The surviving warriors looked at her differently now, not with scorn or suspicion, but with reverence. awe. Had anyone ever seen such power, such grace, from one who did not wear the wolf's skin? Eventually, as the sun climbed higher, casting its full light on the devastation, the Elder Council arrived from the Nightclaw Den, their faces grim, prepared, perhaps, to find us all dead. What followed was their stunned silence as they took in the scene. Vorlag's fortress, broken, his elite guard, decimated, and me, their Alpha King, standing tall with Rinna, her light, her spirit, an undeniable force at my side. Theron's gaze met mine, and for the first time, I saw not censure, but a dawning, grudging respect. The world had indeed tilted. How could they deny what their own eyes witnessed? The proof of her worth, of our worth together, was written in the blood of our enemies, and the dawning hope in the eyes of our people. The journey back to the Nightclaw Den would be long, filled with grief for the fallen, but also with the undeniable truth that something fundamental had shifted within our world. As we prepared to leave the desolation behind, Rinna's hand found mine, her fingers lacing through mine, a silent promise of the new life, the new leadership that awaited us back home, a future we would now build. Together, following our return to the Nightclaw Den, the weeks and months that unfolded were a time of healing, of rebuilding, not just of stone and flesh, but of spirit and understanding. And then, under the light of a full silver moon, no longer a blood moon of sacrifice but a moon of promise, Rinna was formally acknowledged, not just as my mate, but as our spirit weaver queen. The Elder Council, Theron included, bowed their heads, their ancient prejudices finally giving way to the undeniable truth of her power, her courage, her profound connection to the life force of our people. Truth be told, it was a sight I never thought I'd live to see. My Rinna, once the wolfless outcast, now revered. Her gentle strength seen not as a lack but as a different, vital kind of power. Fang purred, a constant, contented rumble in my chest whenever she was near. He knew, he'd always known. Despite that profound shift, there were still challenges. Whispers from other packs, slow to understand, slow to accept. Remnants of Purifier ideology that needed to be carefully uprooted. But then, with Rinna by my side, her wisdom and her unique spiritual insight guiding our way, nothing felt insurmountable. She taught us about the balance, about the interconnectedness of all things, about a strength that didn't always roar, but could heal and bind. More importantly, our bond, sealed by the mating bite during that desperate battle, was a legend in the making. A story whispered by pups and elders alike, of the Alpha King who found his soul in the wolfless girl, and the Spirit Weaver who saved them all. Because of that bond, I was a better king, a better male, more complete. In fact, the Nightclaw Dominion began to change. The old, rigid laws started to soften. Understanding began to replace fear. The arts of the Spirit Weavers, long forgotten or suppressed, were being sought out. Ilara, their primary, beaming historian. What followed was a new sense of hope, a new vitality within the pack. Our children, the next generation, would grow up knowing that strength came in many forms, that a wolf's howl and a weaver's light were but different verses of the same sacred song. What greater legacy could a king and queen ask for? Had we truly redefined wholeness? I looked at Rinna, her eyes shining with love and the quiet confidence of a woman who had found her place, her power, her truth. And I knew the answer, yes. As the silence stretched one evening, watching the moon rise over our peaceful valley, Rinna leaned her head against my shoulder, her familiar scent of starlight and earth a constant comfort. "We did it, Kaelin," she whispered, her voice filled with a quiet wonder. "No, my love," I murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair, Fang echoing my sentiment with a deep, contented sigh. "We did it. Together." and as the wind carried our intertwined scents across the sleeping land, it seemed to whisper of a new age for all Lycan kind, an age where the heart's truth and the spirit's light would forever guide the way, a promise of enduring peace, and a love that had indeed conquered all. Thank you so much for watching this video. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. If you enjoyed what you saw, we've got a whole library of other videos packed with more great content just like this waiting for you on our channel. So, why not dive into another one right now? And hey, if you want to make sure you don't miss out on our next upload, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We'd love to have you join our community and see you in the next video. Thanks again,